Okay. We are live. Yes, we're live. Okay. Um okay.
Part
Let
two.
me Yeah, instead I had mentioned I was going to announce that one thing here, but I think what I'm going to do before I hit play on this is I'm just going to go to YouTube, and in the community section I'm just going to explain what's happening right now. And then that way, if anybody catches that, they are covered. Because at first there's like hardly ever anybody in watching. Takes a second. Oh, there's three people here. Um,
Yeah, we were supposed
and
to be doing an abortion debate, but we had
there we go.
one of our interlocutors not able to make it, unfortunately. So
Yes. Okay. I'm just typing up in the community section. Abortion debate canceled.
so we will be doing that at another time soon, hopefully. But for now, I think the plan is we're going to do our part two for this Alex O'Connor, Peter Singer interview. And so if you caught the first half of that, we got right about where you have it queued up, around 24:50 and the timestamp through the video. So we're going to tackle the second half, which I think is probably the more interesting half. Certainly,
Yeah,
Alex
definitely.
pushes a little harder in this half, so it's
Yeah.
interesting.
And this is also the half that I think some people misunderstand the most, and especially Joey Carbstrong. And I don't. Did you see Joey Carbstrong's reaction to this?
No,
Okay. Don't do it. Um,
okay,
okay, I'm gonna hit play, and here we go.
all right.
Some time ago in an Instagram post, I remember reading that you had, I think this was a quote from your book, Why Vegan, or the introduction to it, that you described yourself as a flexible vegan. Could you tell us a bit about what that means?
Yeah, sure. It means that when I have the opportunity to eat vegan, that is what I will do. But there may be occasions. I don't think it's vital to be hardline in every circumstances. And sometimes, for example, uh, if you don't eat something that is prepared, maybe it will be wasted and there will be no other consequences. So, for example, you get on a plane and they've mixed up your order for a vegan meal. It happens, and they put something else in front of you. Now, if it was meat, I wouldn't want to eat it anyway. But it might be something that's not vegan, but is got some dairy or something like that in it. And it's clear. They've served it to you. They're just going to throw it away if you don't eat it. I don't really see a problem about eating that.
Michael, I think I adjusted the volume. I'm not sure if I adjusted it in a way that goes to you, but Christina in the comments said the volume was off. Did you notice it go up, and is it
Yeah,
better now?
it went up. It's pretty balanced to your level, and I don't. You can probably tell if it's balanced to my level, I assume.
Okay, yeah, you seem a little quieter than what Peter sounds like right now, but
Okay.
I can hear you just fine as well.
You would
So
have. I don't have control on that with this headset. So if you need to boost me, you either have to take everything else down or
okay,
boost me on your end.
gotcha. I think it's fine.
Okay.
So before reacting to what Peter just said, Christina Van Beek, who is a great vegan YouTuber that everybody should go find and subscribe to her channel, she just said that personally she thought Joey was on point. And the only thing I want to say exactly to that is the reason humans have words are to be able to communicate. And so words meaning a certain thing only matter to the person you're talking to. So the thing that I think Joey was not on point about was that I think he misunderstood what Peter meant, and therefore maybe you did as well. But also maybe I misunderstood it, and I should be with you guys. So as we get to it, I'll explain what I think people might not understand about what he's saying. But when it comes to complicated philosophical topics, it's just complicated, and sometimes it's hard to really know what exactly someone's saying. I'm guessing most of Joey's complaints that I was bothered by, if he sat down and talked to Peter and said, "Wait, so you're telling me this?" and Peter would go, "No, I am not telling you that," and we'll see as we go. Okay, so Michael, I just made myself forget what Peter just said. So
Yeah,
what
he
are
was.
what's
Yeah,
your
yeah, yeah.
reaction to what he just said?
Well, he was essentially talking about the. I think the word is freegan, essentially, where it's like you eat animal products in the case where you are not meeting X criteria, and usually that is defined as like contributing to the demand for animal ag. So he gave the
Mm.
example of, what did he say? If I was offered food on a plane and they gave me the wrong meal or something, was sort of his example. I think I can't remember if he listed another example or not, but that's the one that came to my mind.
Yeah,
Um,
what's your thought on that one?
yeah, well, so in any of these cases, like the philosophy of it, I agree with the point, like the overall point that if you are not contributing, that's the, I think the big one for me is the either directly harming or contributing to demand for harming, or like increasing the likelihood, that another batch of chickens are bred into existence to meet an increased demand, or like whatever. If you're not contributing to that or causing harm directly, um, then I think I don't see a problem with like just eating dead flesh, like
Yeah.
in and of
Do you,
itself.
yeah,
So
I
that,
definitely
yeah,
I definitely agree to the extreme. So contributing to it, problem, not contributing at all, not problem. But the in betweens are kind of interesting. The idea of a flight attendant handing it to you and you telling them, "Oh, sorry, no, I don't eat animal flesh." It could spark ideas to people that oh, there's people that are worried about this, so they're going to think about
totally.
it. It could do the opposite. It could make somebody go, "Oh, vegans,
Hmm.
they're wasting food." The waste aspect, I think, is very important. Probably the biggest issue to me would be humans seem to have more of an addiction problem than any other problem, from what I can see. So, somebody that maybe had a hard time giving up meat, if they let themselves have it in cases like Peter's talking about, they might go, "Oh, that tasted so good." And then they'll come up with excuses in other cases.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what I meant by I agree with the philosophy, but the empirics of the situation might
Hmm.
be is where the gray zones come in. And it's like, yeah, if you were if you were 100% confident that the action you were taking didn't meet that criteria of contributing to demand, let's just call it, fine, go ahead and do it. But yeah, when there is risk of that happening, I think that's where there is a problem. So I think the plane example specifically, I would probably not do that personally.
Yeah. Yeah, one case I could imagine it being fine would be so I used to work at a Starbucks, and at the end of the day, all the food that didn't get eaten that had to be eaten that day would get thrown out. Like I took pictures one time, it was like garbage bags full of like breakfast sandwiches and just wasted food thrown away. And the manager, depending on which manager was there, would say anybody can take this home at the end of the night, and whatever is not taken home, if it's like just kind of put in a giant bag in the fridge, the next morning it'll be thrown out. But it's food that would stay good for like weeks. If
Right.
it's just not acceptable for Starbucks. So I would say if nobody was witnessing you do it and you knew you were allowed to do it, so it wasn't wrong or whatever, if you take that bag home and you consume it, then you're definitely not doing anything morally wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. I like the thing that comes up most often in my life is I'll order a vegan dish from a restaurant or something, and they'll put like mayo on it or something, right? Like it's
Mm.
something like that happens. And like I could be wrong about this, but I think the best thing to do is sort of politely just explain to them, you know, mayo is an animal product. It's not vegan if you put mayo on it. Like I'm not going to eat this. Like I'm sorry, but do you mind preparing another one? And then that like it helps. In a sense it like sort of punishes the mistake, or at least it gives significance to it, that like they screwed up. That when somebody asks for a vegan thing, it's important to be extra careful, otherwise it's going to cost our business money, kind of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
in that, and I see that as sort of similar to the plane. It's like if they get it's a punishment that like maybe that the outcome is that the plane realizes that the vegetarian or vegan meals are more likely to come back, and they give better training to their flight attendants to make sure that the right meals are delivered or something, so that that animal meal wasn't wasted. So yeah, anyway, that's just with his specific example.
Yeah,
What do you
definitely.
think there? You agree on the
Um,
giving back at a restaurant? I think that is a pretty common one that probably everyone faces.
Yeah, it's complicated. I think I lean towards the giving it back so they learn from their mistake for future ones. Definitely be nice about it. But it really depends on what it is. So like right now I'm kind of on a health journey, so I'm trying to stay away from most restaurants and fast food. But when I would eat like an Impossible Whopper at a Burger King, I think I found out that they don't even use a different grill, so they put it on the same grill. That doesn't matter to me. Like, even though I'm disgusted by the idea of animal flesh, I'm not disgusted by it enough to care if if my burger sat in the same spot. Because my burger having that on it, I get why that would disgust some people, but it's not adding to the issue like you were talking about. So I'm not bothered by that. But the wrong thing
Same
being
like the
handed,
KFC burger cooked in the same oil as the chicken or something like that.
yeah,
Right? Like
yeah.
the KFC plant-based like mock chicken. I mean, they cook it in the same fryer oil as they do the regular chicken, and like
Yeah.
yeah,
And I feel like it seems reasonable to me for people to maybe, I don't know if fight's the word, but fight for that change if they're disgusted by it. If there's enough demand for the company to have a different fryer, because it makes sense to be grossed out by corpses being in oil where your food's going to be. So I get that for other people. For me, I really don't I don't care in a sense. Like when I look at people eating animals, I think of the sadness of what's happening in the factory farms, but I don't look at it and feel like grossed out by seeing it. I think that's just how my mind is. But so anyways, as far as sending it back, I'm kind of torn on it because I hate the idea of wasting, but I like the idea of people learning from their mistakes. So I think I lean towards the sending it back for now. Yeah.
yeah. But I think the point here is that Peter was attempting to say, in the case where you are truly able to be freegan, like truly able to eat animal products in a way that doesn't contribute to demand, I don't see a problem with. I think that's the point that he's trying to get
Yeah.
at. But the
I
example
agree.
he gave, I think, does sort of belie some of his mindset to approaching this, where maybe he's not as careful as some of us think he should be.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Again, if it comes down to right and wrong, like I think it's weird if somebody eats roadkill, but I don't think it's wrong. I think it's a slippery slope for some people if they eat the plain food. But yeah, if somebody truly can control themselves, they don't care about their health, so they're eating plain food anyways, and they get this and eat it 100%. Morally, I don't care. I mean, especially because I don't know if it's ever going to be possible to fix every piece of harm caused by humans. So I have so many things on a list that if it's far down on my list, I care so much less about it. That there's so many things where there's just such a higher focus that I would much rather talk to a person that's eating cakes and cookies and stuff using dairy than talk to a person that's 99% vegan but is willing to eat something that's prepared wrong.
Right.
Sure. Okay. Angelo says, send it back because if you don't eat let's see. If you don't eat eggs, it will make you sick. It requires certain gut bacteria that you lose when you exclude. Yeah. So there's elements that you can factor in for if you care about health, and then there's the moral side of it. So the moral side of it is it doesn't matter how bad it is for the human body. It's, are you causing harm to others? And then the health side of it, it's just a whole different story.
Totally.
And then Christina said, with the plain example, it's an opportunity to tell the flight attendant that the meal is not acceptable as a vegan option, which makes it less likely to happen again. Yep, that's kind of the main approach I go. Alrighty.
So that's one way in which I'm flexible. I'm also I guess strictly speaking, not vegan, because what I'm concerned about as far as animals are an issue is, again, as we've been talking about, their capacity to suffer. And I'm not convinced that everything that is described by zoologists as an animal is capable of suffering. I would say an example might be an oyster. I discussed this in Animal Liberation Now. I sort of revisit the discussion I had in the original edition of Animal Liberation. And I continue to think, and there's support for this, that it's very unlikely that oysters are capable of suffering. Also, oyster farming serves a positive environmental purpose because oysters clean the water. So oyster farming in waters that are otherwise might become polluted in some ways will be performing a service. So I don't see a problem about eating oysters if you want to eat oysters. It's not something that I eat very often, but I wouldn't really object to that. And I wouldn't say, no, I'm a vegan, I can't eat an oyster because it's an animal, even if I believe that it doesn't suffer and that environmentally it's just as good or better to eat oysters than to eat some grains or other plant products.
Before we respond to what he just said about oysters, I'm curious to hear the level of your concern with suffering versus death. We've talked about it a little bit, but I don't know which one you care about, like to an extreme. So if a farm had 100 pigs and they cut their tails off and their teeth out, and they crammed them in small cages, versus another farm that, let's say, had 20 pigs. They didn't cut their teeth, didn't cut their tails, didn't cram them in small cages, and they had great lives. So the one that has 20 pigs, they have decent free range lives, and then they get executed as humanely as possible. But the one that has 100 that cuts out the teeth and the tails and crams them into small cages, let's say half their life they spend at this farm, and then magically after that half their life, the other half they get to go to a nice sanctuary, live out their lives, and not die until natural causes.
I love how you've added like an amplifier of 5x, just assuming that I would need it.
I'm just wondering if that so how do you calculate those two?
Yeah. Well, probably the first thing I would do is just look at what situation would I personally prefer. Probably the 100 pig farm, to be honest. I'd probably be one of the 100 who gets to live half my life free, I think.
Okay.
I don't know, though. I've never experienced how bad it is to have teeth ripped out and tail cut off. But I mean, like kids that have stuff done to them, but then get to live a normal life afterwards. It's like, is that person glad that they had that happen and are alive? I would say probably not at the time that the circumcision's happening, but yeah, I don't know. I think I would the being able to be free for some part of my life would overcome quite a bit of pain downside.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know exactly where I stand, but I definitely have more care about the suffering.
That's the first thing I would think about is what would I prefer, and then I would try to put myself in the place of if I was a pig, what would I prefer? Probably not having full grasp of the situation or whatever, and being in pain for half my life. Maybe the answer is different, actually, now that I'm reflecting on that. Maybe the answer is different. But I don't know. Both certainly hold a lot of value in my mind, and I'm not really sure like if it's 5 times more or 10 times. Like I don't know how to quantify it super well, but I could think about that.
Yeah. I wonder if if I saw an animal suffering, I'd want to put it out of its misery, and if I saw a human take a pig and cut its tail off, cut its teeth out, and cram it in a small area, I would think, oh, if I could magically make this pig die to be out of its misery, I would do so. But then if the person told me I'm going to cram it in this small space for 3 years and it's going to suffer for 3 straight years, but then after that, I'm going to let it go and have a great free life being just free for 3 more years. And so then I got to think, do we need to look at it as pleasure's good, suffering's bad, but can a certain amount of pleasure, future pleasure, outweigh a certain amount of suffering?
Right.
I know it can for humans. I know I don't know to what level I would accept suffering before I just say I don't care if I'm going to have a great last 20 years. This suffering's too much. But I think I have to just accept that that the suffering of animals is just so depressing to me, that I care so much more about that, like the idea of them being dead. I'm not glad they went through it, but I'm glad like they're finally
Yeah.
not suffering anymore. So
Christina said that this isn't her favorite kind of hypothetical, and I get that. Like it's, you know, trying to find like where the line is can kind of be tedious, but also it's like I think it's important to do sometimes, because if you're trying to like gradually move towards a goal, it's like, does this step take us in a positive direction or a negative direction? And I think just exploring some of these hypotheticals helps us like understand if you know, if the step of moving from farm A to farm B would be a better one. And like maybe there's some non-realistic stuff built into the hypotheticals, but it does help kind of suss out what we fundamentally do value. And I think that is important.
yeah,
but yeah,
and
fair enough.
it might not be for everyone, but I feel like when it comes to people that want to talk to random strangers about veganism, it's good to make sure that you have a full understanding of how you feel on each topic. Because when people just say like, oh, well, what if I only eat humanely raised animals or whatever, sure, you can just easily shut it down. But if you're able to have a conversation with them, I think it's better. Okay. Nikki said, why did the abortion debate get canceled? Is it going to happen eventually? Yes, it's definitely going to happen eventually. Michael here was going to be one of the debaters. I was going to moderate, and the other debater got really sick and couldn't do it. But he's a nice guy. I know him well, and he will be back, and we will make that happen. But since he wasn't able to, we decided to do this. JD Garland says, are you two not willing to have a casual conversation with me without trying to employ debate tactics? I'm not sure what that's referring to, but in the email that I sent to you, I was saying that I think it would be good if we view it as more of a casual conversation. And yeah, I sent you the premise. I think it all sounds good. So depending on when you are free and when Michael's free, we should set that up as soon as possible. So yeah.
Let's before we restart, let's actually talk about what he said just quickly.
Oh, the
there.
oysters. Yeah.
Yeah. Do we want to go into oyster sentience, or do we want to leave that for a separate?
I mean, my thoughts on it would be so short that it almost doesn't matter. But yeah, I just, from my understanding that they're not sentient, and therefore I do not care if I were to discover they were sentient or any flower was sentient. I would start caring once that became the general scientific consensus.
Yep.
Okay.
Totally.
Yeah, I know a lot of vegans who have no problem eating animal products that are about to go to waste. Again, there's some consideration that we're maybe seeing animals and animal
Carson,
products as food here in a way that.
Yeah. Sorry, just on that, I think that's actually one of the weaknesses in the vegan society or whatever. The way that they define veganism as like seeking to whatever it is for animals. And I think that it's fine to use that word if what you mean by it is sentient life.
Mm-hmm.
If you actually mean animals, like I think that it excludes certain things that we would want to include, like non-animal sentient things, as you said, a flower that gains sentience, or an alien or something that's not an animal.
Yeah.
And it also includes things that I would not want to include, like bivalves, or potentially other things as well that are below the relevant level of sentience. So yeah. As long as the terms are defined right. It's like what I don't care for is vegans that say like, well, it's not vegan to eat oysters because oysters are animals. It's like, okay, who cares that they fall into a certain class? It's like, that's not the morally relevant part of a being, is what, you know, genus they fall into. It's whether they can experience and feel pain. So.
Yeah, definitely. And Christina said veganism could also be described as sentientism. And I agree.
Totally.
And well, except for the fact that it would be non-human sentientism. because we don't have to factor in any human issues like circumcision or anything into a philosophy that would focus on non-human animals. But yeah, adding in the element of sentient animals or sentient non-human animals or non-human sentient beings or something is good. I listened to a live stream yesterday of a vegan, kind of a newer channel like mine, and somebody brought up oysters, and he said, I don't care about sentience. If it's an animal, it's an animal. And and I think the problem is there that you don't know exactly what you're valuing. You have to know why you care. If somebody says, why do you care about animals? You can't just say I care because I care, or I care because the word animal exists. There has to be something happening there that means something to you. And so, yeah.
And Garland, stay tuned. He's just about to get into some of those issues, actually.
Oh yeah, this reminds me that one thing that I think is interesting, since since the definition got brought up and the sentient idea, within the definition it talks about what is it? Exploitation. And I heard somebody talking about how insects dying in crop deaths don't count as exploitation, because you're essentially leaving something and then something dies from you leaving it. And it kind of shows me that is why I don't care too much for the word exploitation being in there, because it has so much more to do with your intent, your actions, the force you're putting on something. Because if you find a poison that would just attract dogs like crazy, and dogs would just eat up this poison and die, and you're just wandering around the world just leaving this poison out, killing dogs, but not even exploiting them, because you're not like watching them die. You're just not caring. You're just dropping it off, saying, you know what, if dogs come and eat this and die, they die. I don't think that would fit into exploiting, but it would fit into what I would consider wrong within veganism. So I'm not sure how it should be worded, but maybe it should be exploit and something else. And I'm not sure if that's how the definition does it. Let's see. Okay, so Garland said, let me guess. This entire conversation about ethics with Peter Singer doesn't mention even once the quadrillion animals killed in crop deaths. I think it does. Is that what you were saying to him?
That's the thing. I don't think they get into the minutia, but it certainly is a topic that's addressed with like hens per hectare and things like that.
Yeah. It seems like I think, Michael, that you're with me on crop deaths matter in some form, and it kind of blows my mind that it seems like about 95 to 99% of vegans that are vocal in any way do not care to an extreme, and I think it's worth caring about.
Yes.
Okay, so here we go.
That is if not harmful, then wrong. But of course, as a consequentialist, that probably wouldn't apply to you. And in the case of oysters, we're essentially offering a justification that there is no suffering involved. But I've heard you also say that you will eat free-range eggs, and I had a look to see if I could find some other quotes, and I found something from 2006. So I don't know if your views are still the same, but in an interview with The Vegan, you said you could imagine a world in which people mostly eat plant-based foods, but occasionally treat themselves to the luxury of free-range eggs, or possibly even meat from animals who live good lives under conditions natural for their species, and are then humanely killed on the farm. That's the quote that jumped out of me, and I think the words there, humanely killed, are seen by many, if that killing is unnecessary, as a contradiction in terms. Could you explain what you mean by that as well?
Yeah, I know. I would still hold those views that you just quoted. So in terms of the free-range eggs, I think that of all the animal products that are available commercially, they're probably the least harmful ones, because, and I'm talking about a genuine free-range farm where the animals are outside, where they have a grassed run. They're not dense. They're not stocked so densely that the grass gets killed, which is one sign that you've got too many chickens on your.
Yes, just for the sake of the audience, I presume you're not talking here about just eggs that are labeled free range by the supermarket, but actually free range eggs, because that will be one of the criticisms I think you'll receive there, is that free range eggs aren't in fact free range. You're talking about actually free range eggs?
Some are and some aren't,
what
I
would be
think.
the conditions there for the kind of free range conditions that you think would make it acceptable to eat the eggs?
So we have eggs in I'm speaking to you from Melbourne, Australia. We have eggs in Australia, particularly that you're likely to get from stores that stock more organic produce, but you get them in some supermarkets, where you're told how many hens there are per hectare. And, obviously you might want to check that information. Sometimes you can call the farm and say, can I visit? I'd like to see how your hens are kept. But some of them say, let's say, have 500 hens per hectare. That's a low stocking density. That's low enough for the grass to remain healthy, for there still to be, things to eat that the hens find. It's not just like packed dirt or anything like that. There's not really interesting. So I think that's a reasonable sort of stocking density. In fact, you could debate how far you would go. I don't know. You could maybe go to 1,000 hens per hectare. So I think that's the kind of information that you need to judge if these are what I would consider genuinely free range. And you would want to know, of course, that the birds are able to go outside during daylight hours in all normal weather. Maybe there's some, depending where in the world you are, maybe you might keep them in blizzard conditions or something of that sort. But generally, hens can decide for themselves when they want to go out, as long as they have shelter and access to the outdoors. They'll decide for themselves. So that's the kind of free-range eggs that I'm talking about. And the other thing to say about free-range chickens and eggs, as distinct from, say, free-range or grass-fed beef, is that grass-fed beef is disastrous from a climate change point of view. The methane emissions are high. In fact, they're actually higher in grass-fed beef than they are in grain-fed beef, because it takes longer for the animal to put on weight, which is why they're commercially usually fed on grain. But with laying hens, that's not an issue. They don't produce methane. So I think that's why I say, if you do want to eat animal products and you want to get them, commercially, you can't produce them by yourself, you're not living on the land, then finding a supplier of bona fide free-range eggs, I think is something that can be defended. And the other thing that I would say about this, which also goes back to your point about the humanely killed animals that are raised, is there's a deeper philosophical question here. And when people say, well, you shouldn't be killing this animal, and incidentally, the hens on free-range farms will generally be killed when they stop laying eggs or when their rate of laying eggs declines. And also, of course, the male chicks of these varieties of hens who lay eggs well are not going to be raised for meat. They're going to be killed as chicks. Although there is work going on in Europe now to sex the eggs so that you don't get male.
I'm going to pause here because I want to talk about this next part he's going to talk about in a second. But I think we should go over that. In Canada, do you guys have hectares or do you guys go by acre?
Acres.
Okay.
Yeah, acres,
I know there's
quarter sections is what I think the farmer term here is. How many quarter sections of land you have, or
yeah, I just looked it
I'm
up
not
in
in that. Yeah, go ahead.
A hectare is 2.4 acres. Not that I can keep track of the numbers. I think he said maybe 1,000 per hectare or whatever. But I find it interesting because it seems like most countries have a certain system and then the U.S. has their own. So I never know if Canada is going to agree with us or the wackadoodles.
Yeah, we keep our foot in both camps like we always do.
Yeah. So a thing that Peter just said is a thing that I think might get misunderstood, where when he's talking about the free range stuff, he specifically words it that he can see that as defensible, I think he said. And what I think he means by this is that he's not making any claim that something like this is ideal or in a perfect world we should do it at all. It's if people are going to do certain things, then looking at this situation where you have this many chickens per hectare, grass being out in the sun, than if somebody's going to eat these eggs. It's defensible compared to other things. Well, is that what you took out of it?
That's definitely not how I interpret that at
Okay.
all. Is this the Joey thing? Is this what you just like Joey interprets it the wrong way or something? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, there's a handful of things, but it's
Okay.
I think it's kind of like that. I mean, I think some things like that might be interpreted in different ways. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody could say, "Hey, if we could just put all your ideas into place and everybody like wanted what you want, Peter, what would there be any chickens owned by people and any eggs?" I can't remember what else he says, but based off what he just said, I would guess he'd go like, "No, let's not use any eggs at all. But if we're going to, let's have it be this."
See, okay, so the question Alex asked was he cited a reference from one of Peter's previous books or talks or something where he said that he eats free range eggs. And there was a quote around a future state sort of envisioned by Peter of where eating free range eggs and meat from animals that live in their natural habitat and that sort of thing and are humanely killed could be, and then that's where I don't remember what was next after that. But like it seemed like if you're envisioning a future state that is sort of an idealized future, and so that is how I take that. Do you think I'm misinterpreting that?
I'm not sure. I agree with Christina that he maybe wasn't as clear as he should have been, and I think he's maybe not too clear in a handful of different cases. But that is something that happens when you get brought into
Yeah.
complicated topics like this.
Yeah, and it's like maybe he's more clear about his views in his book where he has more time to explain that. When you're sort of in a live interview, you don't necessarily like get it perfectly worded the first time.
Yeah, well, like yesterday when I did a live stream, I somebody was questioning something I said about hunting, and I was talking about like I don't think animals need to die, so hunting doesn't need to happen, but hunting is in my mind so much better than factory farming. And then somebody says hunting kills animals. That's not vegan. How can you say this? And my words are hunting is better than factory farming. And so I know that's not the case here. He's not saying this is better than this. But that's just kind of the vibe I get. If I were to write a book, I might add in like, hey, if you're going to eat meat, go hunting. But it wouldn't mean that my claims in the book all are what I think should continue to happen.
Yeah, I mean, if it's the case that his position is that in some future idealized world, there's still, chickening and egging and free range meat happening, I would vehemently disagree with his vision of what like a perfect future world would look like. If I'm misinterpreting that, fine. Yeah, should have been more clear, I guess. But like, okay, no problem. I think I agree with you that if that's right, it is a step that's better than factory farming.
Yeah,
it's sort of trivially better.
So the question is, if there was one, where do you live? It's Ontario.
I live in BC. My
BC,
cottage
okay.
is in Ontario, so I'm in
Okay.
Ontario now.
We'll go with Ontario then. So if there was one farm in Ontario that had eggs in this way, where it's 1,000 per hectare, which is 2.5 acres. That's a huge piece of land. And then every other egg in Ontario was not good. It was some form of factory farm or fake free range. And let's say you were a billionaire. Would you find it to be moral of you to purchase a large amount of these eggs and just give them to people that would normally be eating eggs if you knew they wouldn't overeat them, just to make sure that the eggs that are consumed come from this approach Peter's saying, and that many less eggs are being purchased from factory farms?
Yeah, I understand the question. Assuming I could control, or assuming I had perfect knowledge of like the impact on the supply curve, or the demand curve for how that would affect other eggs, and it didn't affect them, like if that actually would have, like if it would create a net good. Let's see, would it be, here's maybe a similar kind of parallel. Like on the face it seems good, but I'm sort of questioning myself. It's like if there was a bunch of people that were going to die a painful death by an assassin or something, would it be ethical to go and hire a more like painless assassin to go and kill those people before the original assassin killed them all, assuming you knew they were going to die? Like, I don't know how directly that is analogous, but it's like, is that better? I don't even know if that's better or not. No idea.
Yeah. I don't know. It's not quite analogous in my mind in as far, like, I think it could be more so, but I can't think of how to do it. But I would say that seems like if you had that exact knowledge, that would have to be better. If it was within hours or something, maybe they wouldn't want a week stripped away from their life to get a pain-free death versus the agonizing one. But in this case, I think it's clear that it would just, unless it somehow made people like double up on their egg consumption, even without having the perfect knowledge. If you just took a dozen of, or basically if you had a tent that, you had a stand like people have like fruit stands or whatever, and you just had crazy amounts of eggs from this, most humane egg farm, and people could just come and take them for free, I think it would be likely that it would cut back in a large way from factory farmed eggs. I only wonder this in a sense that I imagined, this popped into my head the other day, that if I had a friend I was trying to talk into going vegan, or at least talk into doing like free range or cutting back or whatever, I was just thinking if I had extra money and I could buy them like a pack of like lunch meat that was from a free range chicken. And if I said, hey, if I buy you this, will you not buy a pack of factory farm lunch meat this week? It'd be me purchasing meat, which I don't like the idea of, but it would be making that person cut back on the demand. And so it just made me think of it.
Why is this different than like the trolley car scenario, where it's like, if you're evaluating just like which world is better, the one where the trolley car runs into the 5 or runs into the 1? Well, we all agree it's better if it runs into the 1 instead of into the 5. 4 more people are alive. But when you're faced with the decision of pulling the lever, you would not pull the lever. And so why would you not pull the lever to move the cart from 5 to 1, but you would, pull the egg lever and go from the high suffering eggs to the low suffering eggs?
Yeah, we might have to look at the detail, because if you purchase the eggs from the store, then it's putting it in demand. So if they were going to purchase the factory farm dozen, and then I say don't purchase that, and then I purchase the most ethical dozen, then both sets were there. And one not being purchased is going to show that factory farm that it's less in demand, so they're gonna produce less. And then the other one is going to show it's in demand, so they're going to produce more. So I don't know if it's necessarily doing the trolley car problem. It's something like it, but it's more
I think
about
it's pretty
demand.
close. I know, but you have to treat demand as like in the realm of like a morally relevant action. It's like increasing demand is morally relevant. Otherwise, who cares if you buy meat at a store, you didn't kill the chicken.
Yeah. No, you make a good point, because I feel like with the trolley car problem, if I don't know exactly where it's going to go, but in this case, we do know exactly where it's going to go. I feel differently about it with animals. I think that's kind of my only answer.
Mentally disabled.
I know. I feel different about it with suffering too versus death, and I also feel different about it with breeding. If I pull this lever, will a large number be bred into existence versus a small number? So if the train's on track to go splash a bunch of sperm to produce one animal to make suffer, and I could pull the lever and it would go and splash a bunch more and make or let's just say it would make five animals to suffer, I might pull the lever to make it go and make the one. Maybe I feel different if they already exist. Like if we're talking about if I'm going to put something into demand to make breeding happen, does it change the fact that the individual doesn't exist yet?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never really thought about this in the context of a trolley car either, but my intuition is that it would apply in a similar way. I guess it's like, yeah.
But don't you feel different with animals? Like if the trolley car is going towards 5 and you could pull it to hit the 1, you don't pull it, right?
Right.
Okay. And so if the trolley car is going, I'm gonna raise. No, I don't need to raise the number up. I'm gonna raise the number up. If the trolley car is gonna go and hit 100 cows and you could pull it and it would hit 1, you treat that different than humans, right? Like you would choose to get the 1, right?
Why did you increase the number? I don't know.
Yeah, I shouldn't. Okay, fair enough. I don't know. Okay, so 5. It's going to kill the 5 cows, and you could pull the lever, and it kills 1.
I don't know why I would treat that any differently.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I don't know either. What if it's suffering?
Suffering.
What if it's going to?
Same thing.
Yeah.
There might be different thresholds. Maybe I'd have to think about it, but there'd be some rights-based modifier on the pure empirics of the utility.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, yeah.
I asked it hoping for a certain answer, but then realizing that my answer is the one that you chose, not the one I wanted you to choose. And so I think you're completely right. I think maybe the difference here is I think the trolley car problem becomes different when we're talking about putting something in demand for creating a future, for creating a company that's going to be doing thing after thing after thing, is different than impacting individual lives that are there in the moment. I don't know why it should, but I might just need to.
I don't think so, because in the same way that like increasing demand is relevant because it has an impact on, like it's essentially making a contract for that with future beings that you're going to inflict suffering and death onto them. That's sort of, I think, one way of looking at demand, which I think is wrong. It's like, it would be bad for me to create a world that would inflict you with a poison that would, when you have grandkids or something, your grandkid would fall ill and be in a bad situation. It's like, even though he's not alive yet, doing this thing now that creates this future thing, I think is still in the realm of like morally wrong.
Gotcha. Well, what about this? What about if it's just the idea, like, so let's say somebody had money that they were going to give to a factory farm. They were just going to donate this money so that farm could use it for whatever they're doing. Now, if you could essentially pull a lever and tell that person, hey, you could actually give it to this other factory, and the only options they had were the bad factory farm or the good factory farm, then I don't think it works exactly like the trolley car problem, the reason why you wouldn't switch it, because if you're donating this money that would help the company, you would just want to help the company that's going to cause less harm. So it might be more to do with the company and not the individuals. It's not that you care about this chicken that happens to be in this factory farm laying eggs versus this chicken that happens to be in this one. It's more to do with your money going into demand is helping the more moral company.
Yeah, I definitely agree from like the outcome is in the direction I want it to go. But the outcome is also in the direction I want it to go with the trolley car. And yet I am I have an obligation not to do a morally wrong thing. And I think I gotta, let's pause that one. Cause I don't quite know how to answer. I think you're making a good point. Not sure I'm quite ready to give into it yet, but I'm going to think about that some more.
Yeah, for sure.
Chicks of the laying breeds. I think in France and Germany, they've actually passed laws requiring that to be phased in now. I'm not sure what the deadline is, but
I realize he was mid-sentence, so I'll just say that he said somewhere in the UK that it became law that you have to sex chicks. Do you know if that means that in advance they can see in the egg if it's going to be male or female?
Right. It's that, or some sort of I've heard about genetic modifications as well, such that they are in a higher likelihood will give birth to
Oh, like
female.
if they artificially inseminate the chicken?
I don't know if it's a genetic thing or if it has to do with the way it's inseminated or what, but it's
Okay.
I've heard that that's happening in, I think, Germany. I thought.
Gotcha. Okay, so this would mean that legally they have to do a thing that makes it so half the eggs won't be male chicks that get put in a grinder, correct?
Right.
Okay. And so, yeah, and this in my mind is something worth fighting for, and it's why people should consider welfare as a thing worth fighting for.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
I think it's pretty soon. So, that would avoid that problem. But the deeper philosophical problem here is, say, these hens, let's say they do have good lives. Let's just take that as accepted. You look at them on the whole, they have good lives. They have shorter lives than they would have if they lived out their life in full. Is it a harm to them to bring them into existence, to have those good lives for a certain period of time, and then to be killed in a way that they suffer no pain from? They have no anticipation of being killed. They're killed very quickly, and there's no pain. So, and that's what I mean by humanely killed, by the way. And I think that can happen. Again, it doesn't happen standardly at commercial slaughterhouses, but it can happen. And these again, I referred to Parfit a moment earlier, but this is a different and perhaps more famous problem that Parfit raises about population ethics. Is it good that there be more people in existence if the total amount of happiness is greater, although the average is a little less, as long as they still have positive lives? That's a problem which I don't think anybody has given a satisfactory answer to, and Parfit.
I noticed it went into a different category, but it kind of stayed the same. What are your thoughts on this idea of, if a chicken was not going to exist, making it exist and giving it a largely good life, and then it dying painlessly? And let's imagine to an extreme, like an inhuman magical, just press a button and its life's over, like, instead of assuming that humans can do a humane death.
Yeah, I definitely don't agree with them on this issue. I think it's like there's some crazy reductios. I think the idea being, so I'm just going to restate it so it's fresh in my mind. So he's saying that you can't. It's impossible to inflict harm on somebody if the action that you take towards them doesn't result in a worse outcome than it would have been otherwise for that person. Mm-hmm. Right? That's the idea, and I think that's insane. Like obviously they're utilitarian, and so they have to view it that way. But this leads to crazy things like, if you can combine like good and bad actions into a set, which is essentially what you're doing by farming something. I'm saying I'm going to do 5 good actions to you and 1 bad action to you. I'm going to give you enough chocolate that I can, I don't know what we can say on this stream, but I can have my way with you. It seems ridiculous. Like, yeah. But a utilitarian has to bite the bullet on things like that, and I like. Just these kind of reductios. What do you think about the idea of like combining like individual actions into a set? Because that's essentially what they're talking about. Is like, yeah.
So I think I might have mentioned this yesterday, but I don't do math with pleasure. I don't think people should cause suffering, but I don't have any thoughts on suffering that happens accidentally and pleasure that happens for any reason. If somebody stubs their toe, like, I feel bad that they stubbed their toe, but I don't have any thought of a utilitarian calculation of this much pleasure, this much suffering. I don't care if somebody, like, if I know that these 3 people out of the 10 in my cul-de-sac don't have much pleasure at all. They just are living their lives kind of boring, no pleasure, no suffering. I don't think I need to give them pleasure. Maybe I should, but I just don't think that way. So I don't do any calculus with that. I just think that every sentient being deserves to not have suffering forced upon them, and so yeah.
What about if it was suffering math?
Yeah. So in the sense of the things that he's talking about, I would rather a chicken be bred to existence to suffer in the way that these chickens would in a free range area based on the math of their suffering compared to a chicken that's injected with hormones that their legs break. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, let me rephrase. That's maybe an example, but so instead of give somebody enough chocolate such that you can, I'll say break their knee, but we all know what I'm talking about.
Oh, I see.
So instead of that, it's you rescue that person from enough knee breaks, like you make sort of a contract with them that hey, I'm going to create this better existence for you by saving you from breaking your knee 6 times, and then I'm going to break your knee once.
Gotcha. Would it be an actual contract where they discuss it and it's agreed upon? Oh, okay, then no. Like I don't mind some billionaire wanting to marry some poor person, and
let's say
they
it was
marry
like
them because they're
the entailment
wealthy.
of like what would it be? So like let's say I rescue a chicken from a painful suffering factory farm, and I put it onto my farm, and so I've prevented a great amount of suffering to come to this chicken, and then I inflict for my own enjoyment a lesser amount of suffering onto that chicken. So there's no pleasure that's factored in. It's all suffering. That's what I mean by suffering math.
Yeah.
If I'm reducing suffering, does it sort of give me am I allowed to combine those two things into one, such that it's like, yeah, the total impact on this chicken was net positive by me.
I don't think so.
I
I
don't think
think,
so. It seems
I think
crazy, right? Like,
there's the negative rights, and I don't think negative rights should ever be factored. It should be affected by suffering or pleasure. Like either direction. I don't. If there was an animal that was super clumsy, like the chicken on the movie Moana, and it got hurt its whole life just because it was a dumb, clumsy chicken, and then another chicken was not clumsy and was just didn't suffer that much. If I got to pick which one was going to be forced to suffer, I don't even think I would lean towards which one suffered less on accident. I would just view all negative rights as equal to which type of negative right it is.
yeah. And further to that, I would say it's not reasonable to do you know what I mean by the combining actions? Like, I think that every action you take has to be individually evaluated for its like morality, not like and it's almost, it would be better if we were allowed to like combine things, because it's sort of like making a deal with a robber. It's like, or he has a gun to your wife's head or something, and it's like, I'll go to the bank and get you $1,000. Like, I will do this 100% right now. It's like, should you be obligated to keep that obligation? It's like, if the robber can't believe you, he's not going to give you that deal. But of course, you shouldn't have to keep your obligation. I think it's a similar kind of thing with the combining actions into like, this set of actions had a net good, but it's like individually there was a bad action in there, and you shouldn't be able to do that bad action regardless of how many other good actions you combined it with.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
So I could rescue a chicken from a farm onto Michael's pain-free farm. That's a good thing. And even though, like, let's say my farm couldn't exist unless I was killing the chicken.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, I'm creating a better life for these chickens, but it's still a bad thing for me to be killing the chickens. I'm not doing a good thing.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Completely agree.
Okay.
Okay. And I think it works humans, animals, whatever it is. If you save a woman that was about to be, 10 guys were going to have their way with her and then kill her, and then you saved her, It's not like just because if you had your way with her, that would be 1 instead of 10 and she gets to live. It would be, you can't force anybody. You can't.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all negative rights. So, yeah.
Exactly.
But sadly died without being able to give a satisfactory answer to it himself. So given how difficult that problem is, I can't say with any confidence that it's wrong to bring animals into existence, give them good lives, and then kill them in a way that causes them no suffering. I don't know any philosopher who could really argue without solving part of its problems that is unequivocally wrong.
But indeed, the reason why it's a problem, and I think you're raising something of a non-identity problem here. We've got this situation in which bringing a being into existence, in some sense, requires this negative aspect. In this case, it would be a premature death. And you say something like, well, maybe it would be better to not have that premature death, but if it weren't for the fact that we were going to kill them, they wouldn't exist at all, and they have an overall good life that's worth living, then if those are the options, no life at all, or a life that involves the premature death.
I meant to ask this last time I paused, but I didn't bring it up, but it's what he's talking about. Do you think that there is some value in existing versus something not existing?
That there is value.
Like, for example, so I already exist, so there's value in me existing. And same thing with everything that already exists. But if something has not been brought into existence, do you think that that as long as there's not like a net whatever level of bad suffering, that bringing that thing into existence is better for that thing than if it never existed?
Yeah, the way you worded that, I think it's very difficult to answer that because you're comparing it against nothing.
Yeah.
So,
Well, a lot of people, including how they're talking, especially Peter, is that existing is good. That guy, Jerem, that we were talking to, he says the same thing, that the existing matters. And I guess an example of what I would say about it not mattering is, so my daughter, I got a 6-year-old, her name's Charlie. She's amazing. If my wife didn't get pregnant right when she did with her, if she got pregnant the next day or a month later or whatever, that would have been a different human. And since I know her now, it would be horrible if it was anybody else. But at that same time, at any given time that somebody could get pregnant, if somebody went to that person and said, hey, don't get pregnant today, do it next month, then that means that did they do a wrong thing by making a person that could have existed never exist, and instead a different person is going to exist?
Yeah. No, I don't think they did a wrong thing. What I'm struggling with is I don't think that means that I still can't value like the positive experiences of people. Like if somebody has a net positive life such that, they are glad that they are alive and their suffering their pleasure like outweighs their suffering by a multiplier enough that, they're good with it. I think that is a good thing. But I don't think there's any obligation to create that. So I don't think there's any wrong by not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could go and give somebody a compliment and that would be a good thing, but I don't think there's any obligation to go and do that. I think that's maybe a sort of a similar kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm creating a good experience in a sentient being in either action by like allowing one to come into existence and live a good life, or by going and giving a compliment. So I think it's good, but it's not an obligation.
Yeah.
Do you disagree?
Yeah.
It sounds like you maybe.
I'm trying to picture it with the compliment thing, and I think that's complicated, and I don't know exactly how to break that down. But I definitely agree with the idea of something not existing, that they aren't owed existing. Something that doesn't exist doesn't need to exist, and I don't believe the idea of just any amount of adding more pleasure is good. If there were endless amounts of planets with endless amount of room, and I could choose that in the year 2030, there's going to be either 1,000 people born or 1,000,000 people born or 1,000,000,000 people born. Like, I don't think that there's a good thing that would come out of choosing the highest number possible. Just to have existence happen. And I've talked to people that do think this, that making something exist is better for that thing than if they never were made to exist. And I just don't accept that, because if it hasn't existed yet, I don't see any kind of value that can happen until it does exist.
Yeah, let me come back to this, because they touch on something similar to this later on, and I want to get into it a little bit more.
And just so you know, I only have about 12 minutes left.
Okay.
So we should keep going, but then I'm going to have to cut off kind of abruptly, but then we'll probably finish the rest in a third one.
You know, what's the problem with favoring the latter? And you say, and as I say, the reason I think this is a problem is because if we look in a human context, it seems that our intuitions are screaming at us that to do this to a human being would be an ethical abomination. To raise human beings, and perhaps you could keep them isolated so they don't know what's going on. Maybe they're in some kind of cult that thinks that once you turn 18 years old, you sort of go into a different realm or something, but you take them through the door and you slice their throats. Maybe you put a bolt through their head first if you're feeling particularly humane. I think people would ridicule this view, especially if it was promoted as a form of humanely killing them, because sure, it's humane in comparison to what we might do on a factory farm, but perhaps compared to what the moral worth of these beings require, to call it humane would be something of a travesty. At least in a human context, I would imagine you would think that that would be at least wrong and possibly grossly wrong.
So I think in a human context, it's not possible to avoid spillover effects in terms of, you know, the acceptability of killing other humans, and I think that's really the problem there, because we do, you know, as humans, we want to go on living, clearly, and if we discover that humans are being killed in this way, that's going to mean that we're going to fear that there'll be less respect for human life and that we will be killed. I think there are consequences because of our consciousness, our awareness, and our understanding of what's going on. For animals, that doesn't generally apply, I think. So I think as you say, the intuitions that we have that scream to us that this is wrong if done for humans, we don't have those about animals. And I think there may be, as I say, reasons why we don't have those about animals that now, you could say, well, that's just because we're speciesist and we use animals without thinking about their interests. But in these conditions that we've been talking about, as I say, I think it's very hard to argue that it is contrary to their interests. So I wouldn't simply say, well, we wouldn't do this to humans, so therefore it must be wrong to do it to animals.
So to be clear,
should we talk here, or should I let him finish this to be clear?
Yeah, let him finish the to be clear.
In the situation I described of raising isolated human beings until they're 18 and then killing them secretly, the thing that's wrong about that, in your view, is just the fact that there's a risk that this might cause other human beings to be scared that somehow they're going to get caught up in it. I mean, I can imagine very strict laws in place that unless you were born a member of this particular set of human beings who are bred in particular to be kept isolated and to be bred for food, perhaps for just the sake of our taste pleasure, unless you're a member of that group, you're not allowed to be touched by anybody. You can imagine the laws are incredibly strict on this. And you could say, sure, well, there's a sense in which people might think there's a disrespect for human lives that may one day eventually evolve into a problem for us. But you could say the same thing about animal consumption. You could say, you know, if we're going to begin to recognize a speciesism in the way that we think, and we're kind of okay with killing animals, then shouldn't we be terrified that one day we'll be okay with killing humans too? And we think no, because we've put very strict boundaries around this, not just morally, but also legally, that sure, you can kill a pig, but you can't kill a human being. In this situation where I'm killing human beings early-ish in their lives, say 18 years old, none of the humans who are going to be killed find out. All of the humans who do know about this practice know that they're never going to be a member of that group of people. Is the only thing that could be wrong with that, in your view, just the small risk that sort of something might go wrong there and people might be scared? Is there not something wrong with the killing?
Pause for 1 sec.
I mean, you
Just
also,
super quick play-by-play so far. So Alex has given Peter a hypothetical. Peter made a claim about Animal Ag that he doesn't think you're doing a harm as long as you're leaving better off than it would have otherwise been. And then Alex said, would you see it to be the same in the human context? And Peter sort of skirted around the hypothetical, saying that in a human context, very difficult. There's a lot of externalities to consider of if you start doing this to humans, it might impact your psyche and all this. And then so Alex has just taken 2 minutes and very clearly factored out all of the externalities that he could think to do to create a pure hypothetical for Peter to engage with. And now Peter is about to address it.
Yeah.
So I have to say, of course, that these humans would not have existed at all. There's no way in which they would have come into existence, except that they were going to be killed at 18 for some reason.
Yes, to the same extent that an animal on a humane farm, as you describe it, might not have existed unless it was going to be killed for food.
Yeah, I see. I mean, I think you're describing a situation that is hypothetical to test our intuitions, which is perfectly fine. I don't think that there could be a real world analog of this. But if you say, let's ask that question hypothetically under these circumstances, then I agree. It's very hard for a utilitarian to say why this is wrong, given.
Okay. I think that's an okay point to go because I don't know exactly if he has a good stopping point. Do you feel?
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay. I'm going to respond to a couple things over here really quick. So Smexy Magician says, sorry for the comment section. It's not all about the video. No worries at all. So there's about 4 or 5 people having a conversation with Garland Farms right now, and it's a back and forth about crop deaths, and that's great. The reason, at least for me, that I do any of these conversations is the more that humans talk to each other about important topics, the more we understand things. So read all of Garland's studies, see if that changes your mind on things. Same thing, tell Garland things and see if he changes his mind. I don't need the comment section to be about me or this video. I want to give a spoiler alert that I don't agree with Peter, but everything I'm going to say from this point on is going to be in Peter's defense. And so here we go. I'm going to throw out my first thoughts, and then I'm curious to hear yours. I think one thing that's important to keep in mind is that he clearly knows that a lot of what he's saying is wrong, which is why he's saying it's a hypothetical. It's important to use hypotheticals, but it wouldn't work in a real world context, but considering it's hypothetical. So you could view that as a Weasley way to say something horrible, but I also think it's just somebody that's willing to entertain a hypothetical, even if they sound kind of wild, which I might do when I talk about necrophilia or something. That being said, I think something that people maybe miss the meaning of when they talk about this idea of the only concern is the people being scared it could happen to them. That's a very important thing to think about. So when you have what humans want to not be harmed and they want to survive because we have this want for the future. But as soon as a human is killed, that human can't be harmed. There's no moral action once they're dead. It's just the idea of removing their existence. So if somebody shot me in the back of the head and I was dead, it's hard to claim the moral action that's happening. Most things that would be obvious, that would be morals, would be any amount of forcing me to lose my rights or suffer up until my death. And the reason I think it's good to be part of a society is you feel this safety. You feel like the laws are in your favor to prevent your death. So the biggest concern in this hypothetical would be the fear of not being protected. So if you had that figured out, I see what they're talking about. But it doesn't make it okay to kill 18-year-olds to eat them. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I went a very different direction with my critique of what Peter said here, which was he was making the point that evolutionarily our brains have developed in a certain way that interacts with the way the world is. And when you create a hypothetical that is too far removed from the way the world is, our brains aren't equipped to properly address it. And since our, like, I guess in his view, morality is a consequence of like how our brains view things. Like, I'm a subjectivist, that's how I think about morality, is just what's in accordance with my preferences. And so if he views it sort of the same way, he's saying we evolved a certain way, and so when we do a hypothetical, it's like our evolutionary brains aren't like, and our moral systems that come from them aren't equipped to handle this, which I think is kind of crazy, because literally, like, what morality is, and like understanding the underlying principles that we call a moral system is just inference. We go from like, oh, I see somebody killing John, and then I see somebody killing Sam, and I see somebody killing Jane, and okay, so there's something I don't like about all these things. What's that's true of all of these things? It's probably the killing. And then I see somebody kill comatose Andy, and it doesn't bother me the same. Comatose will never recover Andy, and it doesn't bother me the same way. And so I'm like, okay, well, maybe what's the difference there? Then maybe the difference is that I care about like the future sentience of these of people and the current sentience. And so like I think that all of morality is extrapolating, and so him kind of refusing to engage with a hypothetical because it's not something we observe in the real world. Every situation we observe is new, like in a slightly different way, and so we're always extrapolating when we analyze situations. And so I think, like, sort of by definition, you need to be able to engage with any logically coherent hypothetical in order for your moral system to be like complete and consistent.
Yeah, for sure. Well, here, let me ask you a question, because this is the first thing that I asked myself when hearing this the first time. So the average human lifespan, at least in North America, is probably around like 80. The average cat lifespan is like 20 years old. So everything has its lifespan. You don't have kids, but you think you might want to have kids. You know people that have kids. If all of a sudden, or let's say for all of history, humans live to be 18 and then they die just on their own, which would mean they'd have to have kids probably around 15 or 16. So anyways, let's ignore how weird that might seem. Would you think, would that make you not want to have kids if you knew that they were going to die at 18?
No.
Okay. I don't think that fixes the problem. I tried to imagine, so if I was one of the people that didn't know I was going to be killed to be eaten in this hypothetical, like I'd be upset because I have a care for the future. But if I was born and I knew, like, okay, I'm of the species that dies at 18, would I want to keep living? And since I was alive, especially if I could have like a good life, I would want to like have the best 18 years. That doesn't mean I'm okay with being killed, but if I didn't even have the option and I was just like going to live to 18 and then fall asleep and never wake up again, I would still want to live. And I just thought that was interesting. I don't know if that's worth talking about, but it's interesting.
Yeah. I know you got to run right away.
I actually sent a text and I got myself 10 more minutes.
Okay, sounds good. I just want to Vogon Poetry had a comment, I think, responding to what I just said there too. Is there room for our moral intuition to stand on its own? Is it always necessary to extrapolate to such a convoluted extent? Yeah, I think our moral intuition is the basis for like coming up with the moral system that we all live by. And I think that the value in hypotheticals and extrapolation is to a couple of things. One is to test the consistency of your conclusions. So just an example is a lot of people, they have an intuition that, like, well, let's just go back to slavery times. It's like people might have had an intuition that, like, yeah, it's wrong to put a white person into slavery, but yeah, it's fine to put a black person into slavery. That's my intuition. But if you start giving them hypotheticals. It's like, oh, well, what if you had like a white person that just had, really was out in the sun too long and had really dark skin? It's like, oh, no, well, that wouldn't be okay. It's like, okay, so it's not the skin color. So like, you start going to, obviously, like, it's not realistic, but it's a hypothetical that gets you to question whether your moral intuitions are actually right, or if there's like a deeper intuition underlying both of those that maybe is more important to you. Like in the case of slavery, it's like, hey, actually, I just care about all humans, and so I wouldn't want to have any humans be in slavery. And so, yeah, I think there is value in hypotheticals and extrapolation when we're considering consistency, and then also for just like pushing the boundaries for if we only look at like the reality, we don't understand like where the where our thresholds are and where the boundaries are of like when something becomes right or wrong. Hypotheticals allow us to sort of start to consider some of those things, so that when the time comes when we do have to act, we've thought through our moral system and know how we evaluate something. So like Carson running into a burning building, it's funny. I was actually just talking about this with my brother last night. Is like, which if you had 100 people, each age 0 to 100, it's like, which one would you save if you could only save one? And it all took all of us like a few minutes to come up with our answer. But Carson running into that building would know exactly who he would save, because he's thought this through. And so Carson would actually act in accordance with his preferences more accurately and more quickly than my brother or I would have, because he's taken the time to like go through some of these hypotheticals. So I think those are some of the reasons that it's important to do this.
Definitely. I'm very curious. What number did you land on, and what number did your brother land on?
I said 12. My brother said 14, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Mine's 12 too, and 14 is close enough that it's about the same. But yeah, cool. Yeah. No, I think that's very interesting. Oh, I had a thought and it left me. With the Peter Singer thing. Do you think with someone like Peter that he feels obligated to hold a stance that
Sorry,
is...
can I just say one more
Yeah.
thing? Sorry, Garland just responded. He said you can't properly think through hypotheticals when you're not knowledgeable about things like agriculture. Actually, that's the value of hypotheticals, is they're all if statements. So you can think through hypotheticals regardless of your knowledge, because you can say, if this were true, what would I do, or what would I value? And then you go and research to see what is the truth, and then you act accordingly. But the hypothetical part is the if statement, not the fact. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I think hypotheticals, there almost should, and I don't even know why I say almost, there should be no reason one can't accept a hypothetical and answer it, because it really shouldn't matter. But if you feel like you're having a hard time answering it, it means that maybe you're just uncomfortable possibly being wrong about something. But the thing I was asking was the Peter Singer thing. So he says a utilitarian would have to accept this. Do you think that what he means is that he feels like, since he is a utilitarian, that even if he slightly like doesn't feel good about a thing, he has to call it utilitarian and call it his thing? Because like I'm mostly a libertarian, but I will gladly point out the elements of libertarianism that I am not. And so you would think that he would go, well, according to the technical definition of utilitarianism, it would accept this. We can kill these 18-year-olds, but I don't think so. And it's weird that he doesn't separate himself from the utilitarian philosophy.
Yeah, well, I'm actually not. Do you know if he's a subjectivist, or does he believe that there's that morality is objective, or what?
I haven't heard him speak on that.
Yeah, I don't know. So maybe he believes that morality is objective, and and utilitarianism is the basis for morality. So that's a possibility, in which case that could be consistent, that he doesn't really like it, but it's like that is what he thinks is right. If he's a subjectivist, then I think it's sort of incoherent what he's saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right, because it's like if he doesn't like it, then you can't not like it because of what you like or have a preference for is
Yeah.
morality. Yeah, is what is
So I
moral.
so I guess he's okay with this hypothetical with the 18-year-old, but he knows that it would be impossible to not let others be scared of this possibility. So that's why he knows it wouldn't work in real life. Kind of like some of our hypotheticals we'll talk about. We'll say if we knew this exactly, like if we gave out these eggs and we knew for sure the final product was less animals were harmed, then it's okay, but there'd be no way to know. Maybe that's kind of what he's saying, is that he truly would be accepting of this killing and eating 18-year-olds, but everything would have to fall in line perfectly.
I don't think
yeah,
that's what he's saying, but
is he not?
like
Okay.
I don't think so. No, because his conclusion is that a utilitarian would have to accept this if that was all true. So I think his if statement was like, okay, granting the hypothetical, I reluctantly will say that utilitarians have to bite the bullet on this.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Or at least
Oh, sorry. Okay,
that's what I was
I
trying to say.
apologize. Yeah, you should have been more clear, Carson.
But yeah, so yeah, and in that case, I do agree with the people that do not like Singer's take. But I think I understand his take maybe more than most people. Like I get the idea of it mattering if people are prepared for their death or not, or if they can feel safe. That does matter, and I get the idea
It
of.
does. I don't think anyone disagrees with that, but I just think that
Mhm.
all of those, every second he takes discussing that or worrying about that is just distracting from what Alex is actually trying to ask him.
Yeah, which is it okay to kill an 18-year-old? Which it definitely is not.
Yeah.
So I think, anyways. But yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
sorry.
One thing I want to share that I think is awesome, and I didn't know if this was going to happen, is when everybody was hating on Alex, I was just thinking, even if he never talks about veganism again, his past videos are so amazing and so well worded that his videos will be good for animal rights forever. And not only that, but now he's out challenging the godfather of animal rights, which a lot of people will claim he's not or whatever. And I get it. They don't agree with every detail of what he's saying. But similar to Alex, not being a full vegan now, he's like 99% vegan dietarily, and ethically, he's like 100% vegan. Peter Singer, he might be saying some crazy shit here, but this guy cares more about and does more for animals than most people. So in a sense, I think they should give him a break. But also, you can attack him saying that he's okay with killing 18-year-olds. But also, we gotta recognize that no matter what Alex ends up doing, and you can critique the issues, like he is challenging one of the biggest names in animal rights about an important element of animal rights, even countering maybe some actions of his own.
Yeah, it's true. It's like, who else would have been able to get a platform with Peter Singer like this for an hour of his time, and who would have been able to challenge him as directly as Alex did. I was actually really impressed with Alex about this video. I can't remember if we talked about this last time or not, but just like I gotta imagine it was stressful for the guy. Like I was pretty pissed when I heard about his whole community post and everything. Like I wasn't on the hate on Alex and publicly post train, but I wasn't happy about it. But yeah, doing this, it's pretty brave. Like honestly, he kind of went away. He kind of like left the vegan topic for a while and just like did his religion stuff and all of that for a while, philosophy stuff. And then he came back with this, and this is the first time since then that he's posted vegan content. And I was kind of curious if he would just ignore it forever or if he would come back to it. And I thought he did a really good job in this interview. It's kind of reminiscent of old Alex, which makes me think that like his mindset didn't change much. So yeah, I was proud of the guy.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, we're never gonna like see security footage of his every minute he lives. So his actions he takes, aside from what he shares publicly, in a sense, don't matter. So yeah, just somebody I'm never gonna meet. whatever their content is kind of what matters to me. Whatever they say, it's kind of like when people say, "Oh, every time I talk to a meat eater, they say they eat grass fed," but clearly, not everybody's doing that. It's like, if you're going to talk to people, you kind of have to accept their word for whatever's going on. And so, I don't know really what that has to do with anything, but anyways, I don't, just randomly having any amount of time to want to hate on someone like Alex without it being specifically in a positive way. As soon as I was saying that, I was realizing I've made a handful of videos critiquing like Joey Carbstrong's methods and whatnot. And but the only reason I'm doing it is because I'm seeing something that I might want to share with other vegans that I think might be beneficial for our movement, where telling Alex, I hope you choke to death or get pecked by birds to death or whatever, there's just no benefit to it. So, yeah. But yes, I better hop off here. And yeah, hopefully we can respond to that last third of the video all in one chunk next time we get a chance to talk.
Sounds good, man. Part 3
All right.
coming soon.
Yep. All right. Take care. Bye, guys.
See ya.